The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a cold, sterile glow over the waiting room of St. Mary's Cancer Center. Eleanor Grayson sat hunched in a hard plastic chair, her thin frame swallowed by the oversized sweater she'd worn for every appointment since the diagnosis. Her silver hair, once meticulously styled, hung limply around her face, and her hands trembled as they clutched a crumpled tissue. At 72, she'd faced her share of battles, losing her husband, raising a daughter alone, scraping by on a teacher's pension, but nothing had prepared her for this, the crushing weight of cancer and the sting of betrayal. For months ago, the doctor's words had hit her like a freight train: stage 3 breast cancer. Aggressive, treatable, but not without a fight. Eleanor had nodded, her jaw tight, determined to face this as she had every other hardship with grit and grace. She'd called her only child Sophia that evening, expecting her daughter's support. Sophia had promised to be there, to drive her to appointments, to hold her hand through the chemo. For a moment, Eleanor had felt a flicker of hope. But promises, she'd learned, were fragile things. The first appointment had been a disaster. Sophia arrived late, her phone glued to her ear, muttering about work deadlines. She'd barely glanced at Eleanor, who sat silently in the passenger seat, clutching her purse like a lifeline. "I'll pick you up after," Sophia had said, dropping her off at the hospital's entrance. Eleanor waited 3 hours after the appointment, shivering in the lobby, before taking a cab home. Sophia's text came later: "Sorry. Got caught up. Next time." Okay. Next time came and went. Sophia missed the second appointment entirely, leaving Eleanor to navigate the maze of medical jargon and foredrips alone. By the third, Eleanor stopped calling. She'd learned to rely on herself long ago. But the ache in her chest wasn't just from the cancer. It was the realization that her daughter, the one she'd poured her life into, had abandoned her when she needed her most. Today, Eleanor sat alone again, waiting for her 4th chemo session. The room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee, and the other patients, some with family, some alone like her, kept their eyes down, lost in their own fears. She glanced at the clock. Sophia was supposed to meet her here an hour ago. No call, no text, just silence. Eleanor's mind drifted to the past, to the years she'd spent raising Sophia. She'd been a single mother after James died in a car accident when Sophia was 6. Eleanor had worked late nights grading papers, skipping meals to afford Sophia's dance lessons, her prom dress, her college applications. Every sacrifice had been worth it, she'd told herself, watching Sophia graduate with honors, land a high-flying marketing job, and move into a sleek downtown apartment. But somewhere along the way, Sophia had changed. The warmth in her eyes had faded, replaced by a distracted impatience. Eleanor had become an inconvenience, a box to check between meetings and brunches. The nurse called her name, pulling Eleanor from her thoughts. She shuffled toward the treatment room, her steps slow but steady. As the foreneedle pierced her arm, she closed her eyes, not against the pain, but against the memory of Sophia's empty promises. She'd always told herself that family was everything, that love could weather any storm. But what did you do when the person you loved most turned their back? By the time the session ended, Eleanor felt hollow, drained by more than the chemo. She checked her phone, one missed call from her neighbor, Mrs. Carter, but nothing from Sophia. She dialed a cab and stepped into the biting November air, her scarf fluttering in the wind. The ride home was quiet, the city blurring past in shades of gray. When she reached her small, tidy house, she sank into the armchair by the window, staring at the framed photo of Sophia on the mantel. A younger Sophia, laughing, her arms around Eleanor at her college graduation. Where had that girl gone? That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. The pain in her body was nothing compared to the ache in her heart. She thought of the will tucked away in her desk drawer, the one she'd written years ago, leaving everything to Sophia, her house, her savings, the antique jewelry from her own mother. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. She'd always imagined Sophia cherishing it, maybe even passing it down to her own children one day. But now, the thought of Sophia inheriting it felt wrong, like rewarding neglect. Eleanor rose from her chair, her movements deliberate despite the fatigue. She pulled the will from the drawer, her eyes scanning the neatly typed pages. She'd given Sophia everything: her time, her love, her dreams. And in return, Sophia had left her to face cancer alone. The decision crystallized in her mind, sharp and unyielding. She picked up a pen, her hand steady for the first time that day, and began to write. The next morning, Eleanor called her lawyer, Mr. Hargrove, a kind man who'd handled her affairs since James's death. "I want to change my will," she said, her voice firm. "I'm removing Sophia." Hargrove hesitated, his tone gentle but professional. "Are you sure, Eleanor? This is a big decision." She closed her eyes, picturing Sophia's empty chair in the waiting room. "I've never been more sure." The appointment was set for the following week. Eleanor spent the days leading up to it sorting through her belongings, her mind a whirl of memories and regrets. She found old letters from James, photos of Sophia as a child, and a locket Sophia had given her one Mother's Day, engraved with "Forever." The irony stung. She tucked the locket away, unable to look at it. When the day arrived, Eleanor dressed carefully, choosing a navy dress that made her feel strong. Hargrove's office was small but warm, with bookshelves lining the walls and a faint smell of cedar. He slid the revised will across the desk, his eyes searching hers. "You're leaving everything to the cancer support charity," he said. Not a question, but a confirmation. Eleanor nodded. "They've been there for me, more than my own daughter." She signed the papers, her signature bold and final. As she left the office, a weight lifted from her shoulders, replaced by a quiet resolve. She'd spent her life giving to Sophia, but now she was choosing herself and others who needed her more. The charity would use her modest estate to help patients like her, people facing cancer alone. It wasn't revenge. It was justice, and maybe a little bit of healing. Back home, Eleanor sat by the window, watching the leaves fall. She thought of the support group she'd joined at the cancer center, the women who'd become her lifeline. There was Ruth, who brought cookies to every meeting, and Maria, who told bawdy jokes to keep their spirits up. They'd been there when Sophia wasn't, offering rides, sharing stories, holding her hand. They were her family now. But the story wasn't over. A week later, Sophia called. Her voice was bright, oblivious, as if nothing had happened. "Mom, I'm so sorry I've been busy. Can we meet up? I want to take you to dinner." Eleanor's heart clenched, but her resolve held firm. She agreed to meet, not out of hope, but because she needed closure. She needed to look her daughter in the eye and say what had been left unsaid for too long. The restaurant was one of those trendy places downtown, all exposed brick and dim lighting, the kind of spot Sophia loved. Eleanor arrived early, her hands folded in her lap, her heart a tangle of nerves and resolve. She'd chosen a simple black sweater and slacks, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. At 72, she knew she didn't fit in with the young professionals sipping cocktails around her. But she didn't care. This wasn't about fitting in. It was about facing the truth. Sophia swept in 10 minutes late, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She was 38, polished and poised, her dark hair sleek and her suit tailored to perfection. She smiled as she slid into the booth. But Eleanor saw the distraction in her eyes, the way her fingers twitched toward her phone. "Mom, you look good," Sophia said, her voice bright but hollow. "How's everything going?" Eleanor's lips tightened. She'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. But now, with her daughter sitting across from her, the words felt heavy, like stones in her throat. "I'm managing," she said quietly. "The chemo's rough, but I'm getting through it." Sophia's smile faltered, and she reached for her water glass, her eyes darting away. "I'm so sorry I haven't been around much," she said. "Work's been insane. You know how it is." Eleanor didn't know. Not really. She'd worked hard as a teacher, but she'd always made time for Sophia's sick days, school plays, late-night talks when Sophia's heart was broken. She'd never let her daughter feel alone. But now, Sophia's excuses hung in the air like a fog Eleanor couldn't see through. She took a deep breath, her hands steady on the table. "Sophia," she said, her voice low but firm, "you left me at the cancer center. Not once, but every time. I needed you, and you weren't there." Sophia's eyes widened, her face flushing. "Mom, that's not fair. I've been trying to balance everything: work, my life." "I didn't mean to." Eleanor held up a hand, silencing her. "You didn't mean to, but you did. I sat in that waiting room alone, wondering if you'd forgotten me. I took cabs home because you didn't show up. I faced cancer alone because you were too busy." The words cut through the hum of the restaurant, and for a moment, Sophia was speechless. Her mouth opened, then closed, her eyes glistening with what might have been tears or embarrassment. "I didn't realize it was that bad," she said finally, her voice small. "I thought you were okay. You're so strong, Mom." Eleanor's heart ached at the words, but they didn't soften her. Strength wasn't a choice. It was survival. "I am strong," she said, "but I shouldn't have to be. Not when it comes to my own daughter." She paused, her eyes locking onto Sophia's. "I changed my will. Sophia, you're not in it anymore. I'm leaving everything to the cancer support charity. They've been there for me in ways you haven't." Sophia's face crumpled, her composure shattering. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "Mom, that show, could you do that? I'm your daughter." Eleanor felt a pang of guilt, but it was fleeting. She'd spent too many nights crying over Sophia's absence to back down now. "You're my daughter," she said, her voice steady. "But you stopped acting like it. I gave you everything. Sophia. My love. My time. My life. And when I needed you, you left me alone." The waiter approached, sensing the tension, and quickly retreated. Sophia's hands shook as she reached for her napkin, twisting it in her fingers. "This is about money?" she asked, her voice rising. "You think I care about your house, your savings? I don't need that. Mom, I didn't know how to handle this. Cancer. It's too much." Eleanor's eyes softened, but only slightly. "It's not about money," she said. "It's about love. It's about showing up. I needed you, Sophia, and you weren't there. The charity, those women at the support group, they held my hand, drove me home, listened when I was scared. They didn't have to, but they did. That's what family does." Sophia's tears spilled over now, streaking her carefully applied makeup. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I didn't know how to deal with it. I was scared. Okay. I didn't want to see you like that. Sickened and frail. It hurt too much." Eleanor's heart twisted, but she didn't reach out. She'd spent too long excusing Sophia's absence, convincing herself it was fear or busyness. But fear didn't justify abandonment. "I understand being scared," Eleanor said, I'm scared every day, but I still show up. I still fight. And I deserve better from you. She stood, her legs shaky but her resolve unshaken. I love you, Sophia. I always will. But I can't keep waiting for you to show up. I have to take care of myself now. She left Sophia at the table, her daughter's sobs fading behind her as she stepped into the cool night air. The city buzzed around her, alive with lights and noise. But Eleanor felt a strange calm. For the first time in months, she wasn't carrying the weight of Sophia's absence alone. She'd faced it, named it, and let it go. The weeks that followed were a blur of chemo sessions and support group meetings. Eleanor found solace in the routine, in the familiar faces of Ruth and Maria, who greeted her with hugs and stories that made her laugh until her sides ached. They didn't replace Sophiana one could, but they filled the void, stitching together the pieces of Eleanor's broken heart. She started volunteering at the cancer center, helping new patients navigate their first appointments. It was small work handing out pamphlets, offering a smile, pointing the way to the treatment rooms, but it gave her purpose. She saw herself in the frightened eyes of the newly diagnosed, and she wanted to be the person she'd needed when she was in their shoes. The charity had saved her, not just with resources, but with connection, and she wanted to give that back. One afternoon, as she sorted brochures in the center's lobby, a young woman approached her. She was in her 20s, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf, her eyes wide with fear. Is it as bad as it seems?" she asked, her voice trembling. Eleanor set down the brochures and took the woman's hand. "It's hard," she said honestly, "but you're not alone. You'll find people here who'll walk with you. I'll walk with you." The young woman's eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed Eleanor's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling. This was what mattered: showing up, being present, giving what she had. She'd lost her daughter, but she'd found a new kind of family, one built on shared struggles and quiet strength. Eleanor's days settled into a rhythm, one that carried her through the exhaustion of treatment and the ache of Sophia's absence. The cancer center became her sanctuary, a place where she could be useful, where her pain had purpose. She'd started keeping a journal, a habit she hadn't touched since her teaching days. In it, she wrote about the small victories: finishing a chemo session without nausea, sharing a laugh with Ruth over burnt cookies, helping a patient find the courage to face their next scan. The pages were her refuge, a place to pour out the grief and gratitude that tangled inside her. But Sophia lingered in her thoughts, a ghost she couldn't fully banish. Eleanor hadn't heard from her since the restaurant, and though she'd made peace with her decision to change the will, the silence stung. She'd raised Sophia to be strong, independent, but she'd never imagined that strength would turn into distance, that independence would become indifference. She wondered if Sophia was hurting, if her tears at the restaurant had been real, or if she'd simply moved on, burying herself in work and forgetting her mother entirely. One evening, as Eleanor sat in her living room, the phone rang. Her heart skipped, a reflex she couldn't shake. But it wasn't Sophia. It was Maria, her voice warm and teasing. "Eleanor, you coming to the group's holiday party? We need your famous pecan pie." Eleanor laughed, the sound easing the tightness in her chest. "I wouldn't miss it," she said, "but only if you promise not to sing karaoke again." Maria's cackle echoed through the line, and Eleanor felt a warmth she hadn't known in months. The holiday party was held in the cancer center's community room, a modest space decorated with paper snowflakes and twinkling lights. Ruth had outdone herself with a spread of cookies, and Maria was, predictably, belting out a terrible rendition of Jingle Bells on a borrowed karaoke machine. Eleanor stood by the dessert table, her pecan pie sliced and ready, watching the room fill with patience. families, and volunteers. There was a quiet joy here, a resilience that shone through the fatigue and fear. These were her people now, her chosen family. As she handed a slice of pie to a teenage boy with a shaved head, she caught sight of a familiar figure in the doorway. Sophia. Her daughter stood there, hesitant, her coat clutched tightly around her. Eleanor's breath caught, her heart lurching between hope and wariness. Sophia's eyes scanned the room, landing on Eleanor, and for a moment, neither moved. Then Sophia took a tentative step forward, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. "Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor set down the pie server, her hands trembling. "Sophia," she said, her tone neutral, guarded. The room seemed to fade, the chatter and music blurring into the background. Sophia took another step, her hands twisting together. I didn't know if you'd want to see me," she said, "but I had to come. I needed to see you." Eleanor's first instinct was to turn away, to protect the fragile peace she'd built. But something in Sophia's eyes, raw, unguarded, stopped her. "Why now?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with pain. Sophia swallowed, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I've been thinking about what you said," she admitted. "About how I let you down. I didn't want to believe it. But you were right. I was scared. And I ran. I don't know how to fix it. But I want to try." The words hung between them, fragile and heavy. Eleanor wanted to believe her, wanted to bridge the chasm that had grown between them. But trust, once broken, wasn't easily rebuilt. "Sophia," she said, "I love you. But love isn't enough. You hurt me, deeply, and I can't just forget that." Sophia nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know," she said. "I don't expect you to. I want to be here. I want to show up. If you'll let me." Eleanor studied her daughter, searching for the girl she'd raised, the one who'd once clung to her hand during thunderstorms. She saw glimpses of that girl now, buried beneath the polished exterior, the years of distance. "Let's start small," Eleanor said finally. "Come to my next appointment. Be there. On time." Sophia's face lit up, a flicker of hope breaking through the tears. "I will," she promised. "I swear. Mom, I'll be there." Eleanor nodded, her heart heavy but open, just a crack. She didn't know if Sophia would keep her word, but she was willing to give her a chance, not for Sophia's sake, but for her own. She'd learned that healing wasn't about erasing the pain. It was about choosing who to let back in. The next appointment was a week away, and Eleanor spent the days preparing herself, not just for the chemo, but for Sophia's presence. She didn't let herself hope too much. Been burned before, but she couldn't deny the small spark of anticipation. She busied herself with her volunteering, her journal, her support group, grounding herself in the life she'd built without Sophia. If her daughter showed up, it would be a step. If she didn't, Eleanor would keep moving forward. The morning of the appointment, Eleanor woke early, her body aching but her mind clear. She dressed carefully, choosing a soft green scarf that Ruth had given her, a reminder of the family she'd found. As she stepped into the cancer center's waiting room, she scanned the chairs, her heart pounding. And there, in the corner, was Sophia. She was early, her phone nowhere in sight, her eyes fixed on the door. When she saw Eleanor, she stood, a nervous smile breaking across her face. "Mom," she said, crossing the room. "I'm here." Eleanor felt a lump rise in her throat, but she swallowed it, nodding. "You are," she said simply. They sat together, the silence between them not entirely comfortable, but not hostile either. For the first time in months, Eleanor didn't feel alone in that sterile room. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. Eleanor and Sophia sat side by side in the waiting room. The hum of the hospital a steady backdrop to their tentative silence. Eleanor's hands rested in her lap, her fingers tracing the edge of the green scarf. Sophia sat straight, her hands clasped tightly, as if anchoring herself to the moment. Neither spoke much, but the absence of words wasn't empty. It carried the weight of everything unsaid, everything they were trying to rebuild. When the nurse called Eleanor's name, Sophia stood with her, a small but deliberate gesture. "Can I come with you?" she asked, her voice hesitant. Eleanor paused, surprised by the request. She'd grown so used to facing the treatment room alone that the idea of company felt foreign. But she nodded, her heart softening just a fraction. "If you want to," she said. The treatment room was as cold and clinical as ever, with its beige walls and gleaming equipment. Eleanor settled into the recliner, the nurse preparing the four with practiced efficiency. Sophia sat beside her, her eyes darting between the needle and Eleanor's face. "Does it hurt?" she asked quietly, her voice almost childlike. Eleanor managed a small smile. "Not as much as you'd think," she said. "You get used to it." Sophia nodded, her gaze lingering on the foreline. "I should have been here," she murmured, almost to herself. "I should have seen this." Eleanor didn't respond right away, letting the words settle. She'd waited so long to hear them, but they didn't erase the months of loneliness. Still, they were a bridge, however fragile, and she wasn't ready to burn it. The session passed slowly, the drip of the four marking time. Sophia stayed, asking small questions about the treatment, the side effects, the doctors. Eleanor answered patiently, her voice steady, though her heart raced with a mix of hope and caution. When the nurse removed the four, Sophia reached for Eleanor's hand, her touch tentative but warm. "I'll drive you home," she said. "No cabs today." The ride home was quiet, the city passing in a blur of winter light. Sophia gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, as if the drive carried more weight than just the miles. Eleanor watched her, noting the tension in her jaw, the way her eyes flicked toward her mother every few seconds. "You don't have to do this out of guilt," Eleanor said finally, breaking the silence. "I don't want that." Sophia's lips trembled, but she kept her eyes on the road. "It's not guilt," she said. "Or maybe it is. A little. But mostly, I just want to be here. I want to make it right." Eleanor didn't know if that was possible, but the sincerity in Sophia's voice was enough to keep her listening, to keep the door open just a little wider. At home, Sophia lingered, helping Eleanor with her coat, offering to make tea. It was awkward, the kind of awkwardness that comes from relearning how to be around someone you've hurt. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Eleanor had taught Sophia to read, where they'd shared countless meals and dreams. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was a space where something new could grow, if they let it. Over the next few weeks, Sophia showed up consistently. She came to every appointment, arriving early, her phone tucked away. She brought Eleanor's favorite soup from the deli, sat through support group meetings, even laughed at Maria's terrible jokes. Eleanor watched her daughter's efforts, torn between gratitude and skepticism. She wanted to believe in Sophia's change, but the memory of those lonely months lingered, a shadow she couldn't fully shake. One evening, after a particularly grueling chemo session, Sophia drove Eleanor home and stayed to cook dinner. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the kitchen, a warmth Eleanor hadn't felt in years. As they ate, Sophia spoke haltingly about her life, the pressure of her job, the loneliness she hid behind her polished exterior. I thought I was doing what you wanted, she said, her fork pausing midair. Being successful, independent. But I lost sight of what mattered. I lost you. Eleanor's throat tightened. She saw the regret in Sophia's eyes, the weight of her mistakes. You didn't lose me, she said softly. But you hurt me. And that's not something you can undo overnight. Sophia nodded, her eyes glistening. I know, she said. But I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere. That night, as Eleanor lay in bed, she thought about the will. She hadn't told Sophia about the charity, about the decision that had felt so final just weeks ago. Part of her wanted to keep it that way, to protect herself from being hurt again. But another part, the part that still loved her daughter fiercely, wondered if there was room for forgiveness, for a second chance. The support group became a place where Eleanor and Sophia could meet on neutral ground. Sophia started attending regularly, not just as Eleanor's driver, but as a participant, listening to the stories of others, sharing her own halting confessions. Ruth and Maria welcomed her cautiously, their loyalty to Eleanor clear. But they softened as they saw Sophia's efforts. One evening, Maria pulled Eleanor aside, her eyes twinkling. Your girl's trying, she said. That's something. Eleanor nodded, her heart a mix of pride and caution. She saw Sophia's efforts, but she also saw the fragility of their new connection. Trust was a slow build, a house of cards that could collapse with one wrong move. But for now, Sophia was showing up, and that was more than Eleanor had dared hope for. One afternoon, as they left the cancer center, Sophia hesitated by the car. Mom, she said, her voice unsteady. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be part of your future, whatever that looks like. Eleanor looked at her daughter, seeing the woman she'd become and the girl she'd once been. Then keep showing up, she said. That's all I ask. Spring arrived, bringing with it a tentative warmth that mirrored the slow thawing of Eleanor's heart. Her treatments were nearing their end, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic. The cancer hadn't spread, and her scans showed progress. But the real healing, Eleanor knew, wasn't just physical. It was the mending of her relationship with Sophia, a process as delicate as the cherry blossoms blooming outside her window. Sophia had kept her promise, showing up for every appointment, every support group meeting, every small moment that mattered. She'd started calling just to talk, sharing stories about her day, asking about Eleanor's. They were rebuilding, piece by piece, a bond that had been fractured but not broken. Eleanor felt the shift in her daughter softening, a willingness to listen, to be present. But she also felt the weight of her own decision, the will that still sat unchanged in her desk drawer. One evening, as they sat on Eleanor's porch, sipping tea and watching the sunset, Sophia broached the subject Eleanor had avoided. Mom, she said, her voice careful. I know about the will. I heard you talking to Ruth about it. Eleanor's heart sank, her fingers tightening around her mug. She hadn't meant for Sophia to find out. Not like this. I didn't want to hurt you, Eleanor said, her voice steady but soft. But I had to protect myself. Sophia nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. I understand, she said. I don't blame you. I wasn't there when you needed me. I don't deserve what you've built. The words hung in the air, raw and honest. Eleanor felt a pang of guilt, but also relief. Sophia wasn't asking for forgiveness or reinstatement. She was acknowledging the truth. I don't know if I'll change it back, Eleanor admitted. Not yet. Trust takes time, Sophia. But I see you trying. And that matters. Sophia's eyes glistened, but she smiled. A small, hopeful curve of her lips. That's enough for now, she said. I just want to be your daughter again. The words struck Eleanor deeply, stirring memories of Sophia as a child, her laughter, her stubbornness, her fierce love. She'd spent so long mourning the loss of that girl, but now she saw her emerging again, tempered by regret and resolve. Eleanor reached for Sophia's hand, squeezing it gently. "You've always been my daughter," she said, "but now you're learning to act like it." As summer approached, Eleanor's health improved, and with it, her sense of purpose. She continued volunteering at the cancer center, her days filled with small acts of kindness, listening to a patient's fears, helping with paperwork, sharing her pecan pie recipe. Sophia joined her sometimes, not just as a driver, but as a volunteer, handing out coffee, chatting with patients, learning their names. Eleanor watched her daughter with a mix of pride and caution, knowing that healing was a journey, not a destination. One afternoon, as they sorted supplies in the center's storage room, Sophia paused, her hands full of blankets. "Mom," she said, "I've been thinking. I want to do more. Maybe start a fundraiser for the charity. Something to help patients like you." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, surprised but intrigued. "That's a big commitment," she said. "Are you sure?" Sophia nodded, her eyes bright with determination. "I want to give back," she said. "Not just to you, but to everyone here. They've helped you, and that means they've helped me." Eleanor felt a swell of pride, tempered by the caution that had become her shield. But she nodded, offering a small smile. "Let's do it together," she said. They spent the next weeks planning the fundraiser, a community event with music, food, and stories from the cancer center's patients. Sophia threw herself into the work, coordinating vendors, designing flyers, even convincing her company to sponsor the event. Eleanor watched her daughter's passion, her dedication, and felt the walls around her heart soften further. This was the Sophia she'd raised, fierce, capable, and caring. The day of the fundraiser was bright and warm, the cancer center's courtyard filled with laughter and chatter. Ruth and Maria were there, handing out cookies and cracking jokes, while patients and families shared their stories. Eleanor stood at the edge of the crowd, watching Sophia speak to the group, her voice steady and heartfelt. "This is for my mom," Sophia said, her eyes finding Eleanor's. "And for everyone who's fought this fight. You're not alone." Eleanor's throat tightened, her eyes stinging with tears. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen by her daughter. The fundraiser raised thousands for the charity. But more than that, it gave Eleanor hope, not just for her health, but for her relationship with Sophia. They weren't fully healed. Not yet. But they were moving forward. Together. The fundraiser marked a turning point. Not just for Eleanor and Sophia, but for the community they'd built around the cancer center. The money raised funded new resources, transportation for patients, counseling sessions, even a small library of books for the waiting room. Eleanor saw her legacy taking shape, not in the house or savings she'd once planned to leave Sophia, but in the lives she was touching now, in the present. Sophia continued to show up, not just for appointments, but for the quiet moments, Sunday dinners, walks in the park, late-night talks over tea. She was different now, more present, more attuned to Eleanor's needs. But Eleanor remained cautious, her heart scarred but open. She'd learned that love wasn't a guarantee, it was a choice, made every day, through actions big and small. One evening, as they sat in Eleanor's living room, Sophia brought up the will again. "Mom," she said, her voice steady but soft, "I don't care about the money or the house. I just want you to know I'm here, no matter what. If you want to keep the charity in your will, I support that. I just want us to be okay." Eleanor looked at her daughter, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, the weight of her growth. She thought of the will, still unchanged, and the charity that had given her a lifeline when she needed it most. But she also thought of Sophia, of the second chance they were building, of the love that had survived despite everything. "I haven't decided yet," Eleanor said honestly. "But I see you, Sophia. I see how hard you're trying. And that means more than you know." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled, reaching for Eleanor's hand. "That's enough," she said. "For now, that's enough." Eleanor's final chemo session came in late summer, a milestone she hadn't been sure she'd reach. Sophia was there, of course, sitting beside her, holding her hand as the last four dripped. The nurse smiled, handing Eleanor a small bell to ring, a tradition for patients finishing treatment. Eleanor hesitated, her heart full, then rang it, the sound echoing through the room. Sophia clapped, her eyes shining with pride. And for the first time in months, Eleanor felt a lightness she'd almost forgotten. The weeks that followed were a blur of follow-up scans and cautious optimism. The cancer was in remission, the doctors said, though they warned her to stay vigilant. Eleanor took the news with her usual pragmatism. But inside, she felt a quiet triumph. She'd fought, and she'd won not just against the cancer, but against the loneliness that had threatened to break her. Sophia remained a constant, her presence a steady anchor. They continued their work with the charity, planning more events, building a community that extended beyond the cancer center's walls. Eleanor watched her daughter grow into the role, her confidence tempered by humility, her ambition softened by compassion. It was the Sophia she'd always hoped for, the one she'd raised but feared she'd lost. One quiet afternoon, Eleanor sat at her desk, the will spread before her. She'd been thinking about it for weeks, weighing her options, her heart torn between justice and love. She picked up her pen, her hand steady, and began to write. She didn't erase the charities that'd earned their place in her legacy, but she added Sophia's name, not for the house or the savings, but for the locket, the one engraved with forever. It was a small gesture, but it felt right, a symbol of the bond they were rebuilding. When she told Sophia, her daughter cried, not for the inheritance, but for what it meant. "I don't need anything, Mom," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I just need you." Eleanor pulled her close, feeling the warmth of her daughter's embrace, the weight of their shared history. They weren't perfect, and they never would be, but they were together, and that was enough. As autumn settled over the city, Eleanor stood in the cancer center's courtyard, watching the leaves fall. Sophia was beside her, handing out flyers for the next fundraiser. Ruth and Maria were there too, their laughter filling the air. Eleanor looked around, her heart full. She'd faced cancer, betrayal, and the fear of losing everything. But she'd come through it not alone, but surrounded by love, both old and new. She thought of the will, now revised, a testament to her journey. It wasn't about money or possessions. It was about who she chose to hold close, who she chose to trust. Sophia had faltered, but she'd come back. And Eleanor had learned that forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past, it was about building a future, one moment at a time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Eleanor took Sophia's hand, squeezing it gently. "We're okay," she said, her voice soft but certain. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it.